Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Nicholas Gull from CanSIA. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah. I think we're just going to give it another minute in case there are any late joiners to the webinar. So just hang tight for the next couple moments, and yeah, we'll be with you shortly. Okay, so everyone, this is Going Solar 101, a consumer's guide to solar microgeneration in Alberta. So first of all, a bit of background on CanSIA. The Canadian Solar Industries Association, we're a national trade association that has advocated on behalf of the solar energy industry since 1992. We proudly represent manufacturers, installers, developers, builders, owners, engineers, consultants, and other companies and stakeholders who want to see solar energy grow in Canada. On behalf of our members, CanSIA promotes the unique economic, environmental, and technological benefits of solar energy in Canada. We believe that our role as an industry association is not only to represent our members on current issues, but to position the industry for sustainable growth for years to come. So my name is Nicholas Gull. I'm the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs at CanSIA, and I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon to talk a bit about solar microgeneration in Alberta. And we're very fortunate to be joined by our presenter today, Jeff Domenico, who is both the chair of CanSIA's Alberta Microgen Caucus and the president of KCP Energy. So the Alberta Microgen Caucus is a group of CanSIA member companies active in the small-scale solar market in Alberta. So that's solar installations below 5 megawatts. We're going to get into a bit of that detail in this webinar, so don't worry if you're not super familiar on what that means. But it's a group for driving forward best practices and policy advocacy in that very important market for Alberta. And in his role as president of KCP Energy, Jeff is the founder of that company, which he started back in 2007, long before solar was cool, as Jeff is fond of saying, and quite rightly so. And KCP is a full-service solar company serving residential, commercial, agricultural, and government customers, and it was the winner of our 2018 Solar Service Excellence Award. So we're very pleased to have Jeff with us this afternoon to give us an overview of microgen market in Alberta and some opportunities there for consumers of all sizes to take part in that. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nicholas. I appreciate the introduction, and thanks everybody for giving us your time to listen in. I know everybody's time is valuable, so we're going to try and share some helpful, useful information about solar in Alberta, and specifically on the smaller scale, sort of the microgen size and down. I asked Nick to put this slide together with some input, because I really wanted to sort of start things off by trying to frame a little bit what's happening in the solar industry throughout North America specifically, and even more specifically in the United States. I think maybe sometimes it's hard for us to grasp how much is actually happening as far as solar installations and solar in general, I guess, to the south with our neighbors in the United States. So to give you a little bit of a handle on how much stuff is actually happening, how much solar is going in, this year in the United States, they surpassed 2 million solar systems, and they're on track to hit 3 million by 2021. You know, a lot of us, I think, sit back and we wonder where solar is at in the development cycle. Are we just at the beginning? How far down the path are we? And, you know, I think when we look around and look at how much is happening elsewhere, you know, I hope it becomes pretty clear to us that with this is a really, really substantial market. It's a real thing. It's really, really a mainstream product. Maybe another way to frame how much is happening in the United States is they are actually installing a solar system every 2 minutes. So when we try to frame that a little bit in the Alberta context, when Alberta was really installing at its peak rate, and I think we've tailed off a little bit on that right now, we were installing somewhere around 1,200 systems in a year. And what does that mean? That means if we were trying to actually install on the same pace in Alberta as what's happening down in the States, we would need to take that high water mark of 1,200 systems a year and increase it by 6 to 10 times. So, you know, I think, what does that all mean for us, or what's the good news for yourself, for someone who's considering solar for your home or your farm or your business? Well, the good news is installing solar in Alberta, first of all, the product is there. It's a mainstream product, and solar helps you save money, and everybody's doing it. Just not quite as many here yet, but I think we're going to really see that change. Nick, if you could pop to the next slide, that'd be great. All right, so I'm going to try to, we're working under the assumption that a lot of people here are just trying to understand solar and maybe listening or thinking about this for the first time. So how does a solar photovoltaic system work? First of all, solar PV is solar that produces electricity that can be typically used any way you can. It's actually electricity. But the first step is the solar panels convert energy from the sun into direct current electricity. That DC runs into a device we call an inverter, and the inverter actually takes the direct current, the DC, and changes it to AC. It also synchronizes the frequency, takes a look at what the power is, the power characteristics are on the grid, and makes sure that the electricity coming out of the inverter matches up and basically can be used in the same manner as the electricity we draw from the grid. When you're dealing with a microgeneration system, at this point, what will happen is the solar ties into the electrical panel in the house, or the school, or the farm, or the business. And the power from the roof, first of all, will always get used to offset or to fill the need for internal loads. And then if there's any excess electricity, that excess generation goes back onto the grid. Now, the key here is that there is a meter that's actually different than the meters we would typically have on our different building types. Or in some cases, I must say, there are already meters that are capable of operating in bidirectional, so up in the Edmonton area, but generally speaking, usually a new meter needs to be put in place. And this meter has to be able to track the flow of electricity in and out of the building. So once you have your bidirectional meter in place, what will happen is that information is tracked, and then the utility and your retailer will pay you and show the excess credit or the excess generation that you actually generated from that month. And then, of course, as well, the electricity that is going to be used, or rather that you drew during off solar hours. And, you know, I think one of the questions we used to get a lot, we get it less and less, is where are the batteries? And this is actually a grid-tied system, and batteries are not a requirement. When you see batteries starting to be used now in grid-tied solutions, depending on where you are, and not in Canada at this stage, there may be some economic reasons to grab those solar electrons and put them in your battery and choose to use them at a different point in the day. But more typically, when you're using a battery here in Alberta specifically, you're doing it for resiliency reasons. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we were to look down in California for a moment, they've been dealing obviously with wildfires, and they've actually got one of the tactics that the utilities have taken, PG&E specifically, is they will actually intentionally brown out different jurisdictions or different areas depending on the fire risk. Now, if you're in that area, you're going to lose your power, and they're doing it to try to contain the risk. That would be an example where resiliency, or a resilient system with a battery in it, might be a great option, because during that outage, you're able to gain power from the battery. So there's a little bit about how solar PV works. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to just, go ahead, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, I was going to just say that, so we put together a couple, there's some great pictures here of different systems of different size. And the first example here is a 2 megawatt solar farm near Bassano. Looks like it was done back in 2015. So how big is 2 megawatts? It's 2,000 kilowatts. We'll have a couple other system pictures in a moment here, but you know, an average residential system now is about 7 kilowatts. So big difference. The other thing you might see on the utility system is that, you know, they probably are not operating under the microgen scenario. They'll have a different method or model, distributed generation or transmission connect, that they're using to actually tie into the grid. They're not associated or tied to a building or anything. The next example is a residential system. And this is about a 5.8 kilowatt. So I think you'll remember I mentioned a 7 kilowatt is what we're seeing, at least right now, for average residential system sizes. So a few more panels than what's going on here, another kilowatt. And then this example is a commercial system. So the residential system and this commercial system and the next commercial system are all examples of microgeneration. So they are tied into the building electricity system, and then they have the ability to use that electricity within the building and to offset the load, and then the excess goes out through a bidirectional meter, is captured and tracked by the utility, and then the building owner is credited. Okay. So just continuing on that, a little bit more around how that works or what the regulation is in place. So since 2007, there's been a regulation or a regulation in place called microgeneration regulation, and it's a piece of legislation, which is the microgeneration agreement or regulation. And it's, to give you an idea of where things were before that time, around 2007, when some of the very first projects were put in Alberta under a municipal program called Last Year the Sun, the process, application process to actually be able to tie to the grid or interconnect with the grid was basically the same process for a very small solar electric system. 1 kilowatt was the size of those systems, as what would have been done if you were a coal generation plant. And it was quite a process. We did it and we worked our way through it. And really one of the great end results of that was the Last Year the Sun project learnings drove the initiation of the microgeneration legislation. And, you know, it's actually a really powerful, clean process and document. It makes it very clear on the rules. And what it basically says is if you have followed the rules and you've worked through the process and you have a safe system that has all the proper certifications and equipment, the utility will accept you and will be able to generate, and you will be able to tie in, interconnect. They will pay you for the excess electricity, and they will continue to feed you electricity when your solar system is not needing it. And it was a really big accomplishment, and to this day, I think it's a great tool and a great mechanism that's in place that frankly makes this part of the process, I believe, a lot easier than it is in other jurisdictions. So it's a great check mark for Alberta in the solar realm.
Is that yeah? So just on that point, Jeff, I mean, that must make it, compared to a lot of jurisdictions around the world, quite easy to connect a new solar system to the grid. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's easy, relatively easy. And then I guess the other thing is that I didn't mention is actually the size of the system too, Nick, like up to 5 megawatts. So you saw the utility example, that was only 2 megawatts. So you can put a lot of solar on a building to get to that 5 megawatt mark, and you can still operate under the microgeneration regulation. Now, one thing I completely missed that I want to circle around and talk about here for a moment is there's a requirement. One of the key pieces that must be adhered to if you're going to be a microgenerator is you can't actually produce more electricity on the system or from the system that you have relative to the amount you consume. So what that means is if you require or previously used 100 kilowatt hours in a year, which is a low number, a more typical number for a home would be around 7,800 kilowatt hours. Let's say we're going with 7,800 kilowatt hours. You can't put a system on your roof that's going to generate 10,000 kilowatt hours in a year. You can put in a system that'll generate 7,800 kilowatt hours in a year. So that means that's the largest system, though, that you can put on your building or at your location and still operate under the microgeneration agreement. One other thing I think that people sometimes, when they hear that, they say, well, when am I ever going to have a scenario when there's excess electricity? So try to think about it like it's a energy bank account, if you will, right? So the 7,800 kilowatt hours are going to be produced. Some may be used internally. There'll be times when there's excess generation and it's going back, but the cumulative amount of production can't exceed what you were previously using in the course of a year.
Makes sense.
Okay, maybe take a look at the next slide.
Yeah, so this is just a very sort of high-level look at some of the conditions that you should consider when determining whether or not solar is right for your home or your business or your farm or perhaps your community center. Basically, there's three sort of key qualities here that we need to consider. The very first one is just the roof orientation. This means essentially what is the cardinal direction that your roof faces, because this is going to have a pretty big impact. I mean, here in the Northern Hemisphere, south-facing roof, your best bet. But however, just because of that orientation toward the south, that means you're going to get most of your output from a rooftop solar system right in the middle of the day. If your system faces east or west, or northeast or northwest or southeast, southwest, you're going to see a bit less total output than you would with a directly south-facing system. However, if you want to take advantage of early morning sunlight, for example, you're going to get more of that with an east-facing system. And conversely, if you want to take advantage of evening sunlight, then you're going to get more of that with a west-facing system. So that's just something to bear in mind. With a north-facing system, I mean, depending on where you are, your output is going to be 40 or 50% less than a system with another orientation there. So that's a pretty key point, and that'll significantly affect the payoff from the lifetime benefit of that system. Another key factor is just the shading and extent to which your building might be surrounded by trees or a tall building right next door, because that will pretty significantly impact the output that you get. So if you're the shortest house on the block and you've got houses on either side of you, that's probably something you should bear in mind. And a reputable installer will talk you through how that would work out for you. So that's really important. And then the last aspect is just the quality of components you use. So solar has come a long way over the past 10 years. And the quality and performance of modules, inverters, and even racking equipment, that's really increased and improved as time has gone on and as more systems have been installed. So if you pay a bit more upfront, generally speaking, you're going to get what you pay for in terms of more durable components, less need to replace certain parts and equipment over the lifetime of the solar. However, I mean, if you spend a bit less upfront, just something to bear in mind that down the road, 10 years or so, you might need to, for example, replace your inverter. So again, this is something that you'll need to resolve on a case-by-case basis with the person who's going to be installing that system for you. But there's plenty of really good evidence out there and good advice available. Yeah, I think that pretty well covers it. Anything you'd want to add there, Jeff?
Yeah, if I can, Nick, a couple other things. Obviously, well, not obviously. I think first one is, you want to look at the age of the roof on your home. Or building? Are you looking at replacing that in the near future? If you are, then you should certainly. There's nothing wrong with holding off or tagging out to the time when you actually do the roof replacement. The second one is the roof material can sometimes make things complicated or less complicated. Certainly there are preferences. Standing seam roofs, though metal seam roofs, though they're more expensive maybe to install for the roof itself, when you put the solar on it, it works very well. You actually end up being able to clamp right onto the seams. Asphalt shingles are no issue. Cedar shakes are definitely more involved, and hence it's a more expensive install. And similarly, tile roofs are also more expensive. The third thing, and we've had lots of pictures of houses and commercial buildings and such here, but one of the realities that we sometimes struggle to address is the ownership structure of the home. So if I guess a simple example would be if you're renting, that's probably not going to be an easy scenario for you to put solar on the home. But one of the ones we often really struggle with to try to come up with a solution that works for all the players involved is a multi-unit type residence where there's multiple owners. They're all trying to work together to try to come up with a model that works. And sometimes there's even, depending on how the building is wired, the multi-unit building is wired, things can be easier or more complex to actually try to operate in a microgen type model. I think we always try, maybe just the three things we always try to consider is and sort of seem to play into the size of the system that a building owner would be considering are how much roof space is on there, and do you have the right type of roof? How much electricity do you use, back to the microgeneration regulation we were talking about, and what is your budget? So those three pieces really play into it.
Definitely. So do you want to just walk us through this example for a typical residential system, Jeff? Yes,
why don't I try this? So I guess the assumption is that people always want to at least try to understand what the financials might look like for a residential, or we'll use a residential example here. First, just to get some context on the last two images, right? Those systems are probably almost more around 12 kilowatts versus 6 kilowatts. So this one we're looking at here is certainly a larger system than 6 kilowatts. Sorry, we were scrambling a bit, so we didn't grab a 6 kilowatt picture, but just here we have a typical 6 kilowatt system that's maybe slightly smaller than our average system size we're working right now, typically in installing. An average Alberta home uses about 7,800 kilowatt hours in a year, and this system might produce between 60 to 100% of that average Alberta home's electricity. The variation you see between even identical houses is frankly sometimes quite impressive or surprising. But regardless, it's really looking at that bill and understanding how much electricity you're using, how much you can produce, and then coming up with a predicted portion of the electricity that the solar system can provide. So in this example, an upfront sort of standard cost for a 6 kilowatt system might be somewhere around $17,000. And the utility cost, so the cost that you're paying for the electricity that you're buying from the grid, is probably around 12-ish cents. And I'm going to talk more about what that number is made up of in the next slide here, but there's the energy piece, the piece that we all look at when we're trying to pick our energy retailer. And then there's the administration piece, and that administration piece, and I put T&D there, transmission distribution, but the administrative piece, it actually does have a variable portion in it. And I'll sort of try to show you the breakdown of that in the next slide. But in the meantime, work with me, and let's say that the utility cost per kilowatt hour when you're buying that kilowatt hour combined is about 12 cents a kilowatt hour. And the cost per kilowatt hour of the solar electricity, we look at it over the lifespan, is about 9 cents. So you would say, okay, so if I pay for the system up front, I'm actually buying electricity that costs less over the life of the system relative to what I would have been paying for utility electricity today. In this example, that translates into an annual rate of return of about 5.8% and a payback of about 15 and a half years. Now, these numbers are unique and specific to every single system. And it's one of the key pieces that you can really lean on your installer or the companies that are putting together pricing for you to work with you to share those numbers to help explain the next level of detail if you're deep diving on it, but also to try to understand and ensure that this is the type of information that's being provided by the installer, because I think it's a key piece. So
definitely. So with regard to that 15.5-year payback, Jeff, how long could a consumer expect their rooftop PV system to last?
So yeah, that's a great question. So we would certainly, when we run our numbers, we're looking at a 25 to 30-year life on the system. And if we look at the major components within the system, what you'll see is inverters will have a manufacturing warranty of probably, somewhere around 15 years. And then the modules on the roof will typically there's two types of warranty that'll be applied to them. There'll be some sort of manufacturing warranty, workmanship warranty of around 15 years, somewhere in that range at least. And then they always have something called a performance guarantee or performance warranty. And the performance warranty will say something along the lines of, this module will produce X% of the nameplate value in year 25. So, for example, this 315 watt module, that's what the nameplate says on it, that it will produce 80% of that 315 watts in year 25. Okay? And that is really important, that performance guarantee, because it's what gives us the confidence to do some of the calculations around the financials in that. If we didn't have a predictable production number out of the modules, then the financials fall apart, and it's just not a valid predictive production number. So the module manufacturers have really stepped up on that. Nick was mentioning the quality of the modules. Everybody that I've seen all across Alberta, as far as the installers, are all using what are called tier 1 modules. So, the major name brands with giant market caps behind them. They're going to be around for the next 20, 25, 30 years. They're not fly-by-night outfits, and that should give the solar consumers comfort, but it also gives us in the Alberta solar industry comfort that we're providing high-quality products to our customers.
Right on.
Okay. So hopefully some people, I haven't put everyone to sleep here. Yeah. So let me see how I do on this one. So this is the slide I said. This is around how much a utility kilowatt hour actually costs when you buy it from the utility now, or from your retailer. So you see the bottom is on the left-hand side, energy charge 68 cents. And then that top piece, the top two boxes, those are what we see as the admin fee. There's no breakdown of that on our bill. There might be, but it'll be like on a line item. It'll never be a price per kilowatt hour. But on the right, you can see in this example, there's variable transmission, distribution, and a couple other factors. And that can vary depending on who the utility is in that sector and current rates between 5.5 to 10 cents at the residential rate classes. So this is the part where it really, once again, you should really be, I guess, as a consumer, potential consumer, you should really make sure you understand that, because I can tell you, first of all, depending where you actually geographically are located, that variable transmission and distribution will change substantially. And I can tell you, depending on how much electricity you use, you may fall into different rate classes that completely change that number as well. and ensuring that the group that's providing the economics to you to help you decide whether or not to go with solar or not has confidence that they're using the right rates and the current rates, and they understand what's happening there, really can affect the economics of a project. In this example, just to finish things up, you see this is what solar competes against. In this example, you're looking at an 11.5 to 16 cent kilowatt hour. And if you recall on the previous slide, we'd come up with a solar price per kilowatt hour of 9 cents, which is less than the utility price that it's competing against. So just one more comment, if I can, back to the bar there. One of the things that can get missed when people are trying to understand what's going on with their solar rates and their utility rates is when you ship an excess kilowatt hour from your building back through that bidirectional meter into the grid, you only recoup the energy charge, the 6 to 8 cents in this diagram. You don't get anything on the variable T&D piece. However, if you use a kilowatt hour off your roof in your building, you avoid the energy charge of 6 to 8 cents and the variable T&D piece in this example of 5.5 to 10 cents. So when you use the majority of your electricity within the building, you see the maximum economic benefit. But of course, the really fun and cool thing is getting yourself to net zero, but just beware when you're shipping those kilowatt hours back, they're not actually as valuable as the utility kilowatt hour that you would have had to purchase, okay?
It's a very important point. So the best use then, I guess, would it be fair to say, Jeff, of a solar kilowatt hour is to use it yourself, and the next best is to sell it to the grid.
Yep, that's right. You got it.
Right on. Okay, so just to quickly cover, throughout this, we've sort of alluded to the importance of talking to your installer and having a really clear picture of what you're getting into before you go ahead and purchase solar. So when evaluating a potential installer, it's really important to ask a few questions. And so here we have just a few bullet points. I mean, there's a lot of questions you should be asking, but these are sort of top 6, I guess. So do their employees or contractors have specialized solar training? You don't want somebody who's just like a roofer or something. It's extremely important that they know what they're doing. If they're not solar specialists, what experience do they have successfully completing solar projects? So somebody reputable, they'll be able to show you a portfolio of beautiful projects that they've already completed. You know, a company like Jeff, been in business since 2007. They've got a lot of work to stand on, and a good company will be able to speak to that. Are they familiar with rebate and financing programs available in your community? We're going to get to that in the next slide. Do they have a portfolio of similar solar PV installations they can share? So some installers will specialize in larger scale commercial rooftops. Others will focus more on the residential market. So you're going to, depending on what you're after, whether it's solar for your farm or your small business or a warehouse or your home, you're going to want to find somebody who has expertise in that specific area. If their main experience is unrelated to solar, how do their skills and experiences relate to the solar business? I mean, hopefully you'll find somebody with a lot of experience specifically in solar, and somebody reputable. Last of all, they will offer a workmanship warranty. So not just for the components themselves, but for the quality of work they do installing it. Anything you'd like to add there, Jeff?
No, I think that's a good summary.
Right on. All right. So not a ton of options in terms of financing a PV system, but Jeff, do you want to maybe walk us through a couple here?
Sure, thanks. So I think financing options are always changing, but you know, at the current point, really there have been within the province options to finance. Of course, you can buy it up outright yourself. There's been leasing options and so forth, and they can vary even potentially jurisdictionally, or at least maybe more so on the incentive side. So one of the programs that still is out there is the ATB Financial Program, which has a solar loan and a line of credit. They have tried to come up, and I think they made a really good effort to come up with a solution that is focused for residential. They also are really they've worked hard on the commercial side and on the agricultural side. So you know, I have to I'm going to tip my hat to ATB. I know we spoke to them, I guess 2 years ago now, and you know, over the course of about 2 conversations, they basically jumped on board and said, yes, this is something we should be doing, and really jumped in with both feet to try to support the development of the solar industry and help homeowners, businesses, farmers, enable them to be able to move forward with solar. So that was a great program, still in place, and something you should certainly look at if financing is a requirement.
Nice.
The next slide. Yes, so residential program incentives. So there's right now, currently at the provincial level and at the federal level, there's no residential incentives. So Alberta provincial level. However, a few of the municipalities have stepped up with solar programs within their jurisdictions, and 3 of them that we've listed here are Medicine Hat, City of Edmonton, Town of Banff. I should have added Town of Canmore. I apologize. Looks like they're going to they're going to kick their program out and make that happen again. Push it out, I guess I should say. And there may be 1 or 2 others there, but that's really a sort of a quick cross section of some of the residential programs. And I think, you know, you want to keep watching that to see what changes with all the changes in government and everything else that have been going on recently. So one call out, I guess, as well too, right? Sorry, Nick, I was just going to say the Medicine Hat program is getting pretty near the end of the next cycle here, with January 6th being the deadline.
Jeff, could you maybe walk us through what those specific incentive programs entail?
So they change each year. I'm going to leave the Medicine Hat one alone. City of Edmonton is I believe at 40 cents right now a watt, which is pretty reasonable up front. Town of Banff previously was matching the provincial incentive. So when the provincial incentive was 75 cents a watt, they would match it with 75 cents a watt, which is $1.50, which is a very substantial combined incentive. And you know, Town of Canmore, what they've done is they've got a smaller budget, but they would do, you know, 10 to 15 systems, and they would target somewhere around $1,000 per system. And they didn't tie it to system size. They just had a flat incentive. Could actually be a little bit more this year. I haven't seen the final numbers yet.
Okay. So if you live in Medicine Hat and are looking to install solar on your home, get those applications in before January 6th. Do we have a sense on the timing of the other 2? I guess kind of in flux.
Well, I think the City of Edmonton program, as far as I'm aware, is still on. The Town of Banff, they typically roll the new details for their program out, as does Canmore, each year early in the year. So we should see something from them as to what their program will look like in 2020.
Okay, but definitely something to bear in mind if you live in those communities. That's great.
All right. On the commercial side, this is a pretty quick slide as well. The one piece that's still in place within Alberta for commercial solar programs is the federal tax credit, which is an accelerated capital cost allowance. They actually allow you to depreciate the entire amount within the first year 1 against, well, I'll just leave it there for those of you who know what a capital cost allowance is. That's actually a pretty big thing. If you've got a profitable company and you're looking to make a serious reduction in your taxes, this is actually a pretty powerful tool. And sort of people have been interested in watching it closely and taking advantage of it where they can. Yeah.
Great.
All right. So Alberta Municipal Solar Program, I think we got our letters wrong on the title there, but sorry about that, folks. So AMSP has been the source of the funding for the different municipal projects that have been undertaken over the last couple of years at least in Alberta, and that program, as I understand it, is actually nearing the end of its financing envelope. I guess they're just about have used up all their money. So if you have a project and you're a municipal group and you're trying to make it happen, you want to jump on that very quickly. The one thing that I have heard though as well is that the MCCAC, the Municipal Climate Change Action Center group, are also facilitating a program called Solar for Schools, SFS. And they run it pretty much under the same, pretty similar application process as the AMSP, similar incentive amounts. And my understanding is that there's still quite a bit of funding for that one available. So if you are on the call and you're a school board and you're wondering about a program, this is one that you probably want to look at for sure. And if you have some other way that you think you can, you want to try and do something within a school board, then there's certainly dollars left for this in this program. At least the last I heard, which was as recently as last week. There is, I think, some of you may recall that there was a big push to put solar on all of the new schools that are going in Alberta, and that, I don't know if that's still continuing or not, but this SFS program is actually intended for existing schools. Okay, so try and keep that in mind, which is good, because for a while there, the only incentives available for schools was when they were building that new school. Okay.
Good to know. So if anybody is working on a school board or knows somebody who is, this is a good incentive to bear in mind there. So just lastly, we really wanted to touch upon the consumer protection aspect, and this is very important for solar. So CanSIA, as a trade association, we pride ourselves on our consumer protection program. Upon joining CanSIA, all installer members must abide by our Solar Business Code of Conduct, and this basically means that if something goes wrong and you're having difficulties as a solar homeowner or a small business with rooftop solar, your system isn't working out the way you expected, you can contact us, and we have a resolution process in place that can, hopefully come up with a solution to your complaint. So basically, submitted complaints are reviewed by our ethics committee, and where the committee chair will assist in finding resolution that both sides are happy with. You can find a list of our members by going online at cansia.ca/go-solar, and that's a list of all our member companies. I believe you can sort by province as well as market segment, so you'll be able to find which specific installers are active in Alberta right now, and those companies all must abide by our business code of conduct. So yeah, just like to open it up to questions if there are any. Can submit them either using the chat function or can they say them out loud? Or?
Yeah, they can raise their hand.
Oh, okay. So while we're waiting, sorry. Okay, so we've got two questions that have come in. Number one, I have a 20-foot by 10-foot pergola that is within a couple of feet of the house. would this be a valid location to install panels? Pergola. Jeff, are you familiar?
No, I think it sounds like it's just a standalone structure that's maybe just a couple of feet away from the house. So I think the short answer is yes, that should probably work, and you would end up running the electricity from that structure to the house if there's not already electricity running across. And with that short of a jump, I don't think it would be that big of an issue. One of the key things to think about would be to just make sure that you're comfortable with the structural integrity of the structure that you're looking at putting the solar on, and of course the orientation would be something you'd want to consider as well. But you know, based on what I just heard, I don't see why you could not put solar on that structure, bring the electrical from the solar back to the house, and go from there.
Okay, good to know. So yeah, as it seems like a pretty small external building, probably good to bear in mind the structural integrity there, but in theory, that should be completely fine. Next question, is there CMHC, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, insurance available for new home builds with solar grid tied? Jeff, do you know anything about that?
I don't. I think it's a great question, and I'd be pretty disappointed if CMHC wasn't going to offer that insurance just because there was solar on the home. I can't imagine that would be the case, but I think that's one we would have to go. Maybe we can go away on that one, Nick, and just confirm. Great question.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really key one. And I know CMHC are well, under the new federal government, are looking into some more specific programs around supporting home energy efficiency. And so there might be some more opportunities for solar there as well going forward. Another question, are there rebates in Alberta for home installs? So we covered this a bit. Unfortunately, there is no longer any provincial incentive available for domestic solar installations, or commercial for that matter. However, at the municipal level, there are a couple of different programs available to support just residential. So we've got programs in Edmonton, Canmore, and Banff, and then up until January 6th, Medicine Hat. So I think those are probably your best bet in terms of rebates available in Alberta right now, unfortunately. That's something we're working on at CanSIA to obviously advance that going forward. Another question, as an individual, can we receive rebates on the purchase of equipment? As a business, I guess you can claim an accelerated capital cost allowance on the value of the solar installation up to 100% of the full value of that within year one. As an individual, I don't think so. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm not. I might understand that question a little bit differently. It sounds like perhaps the person is asking, "Hey, can I DIY this? Can I do it myself?" And
okay.
And so the answer, I think, is a qualified yes. And what as long as you can find a way to work through all the different documentation and regulations and such, I think that's something that typically, or actually almost 100% of the time, the installers do as just part of their core business. Then you should be good there. And as long as you can find a way to get an electrical permit done and pass that permit and have all the checks in place that you have something there, you should be okay. Now, that said, when Energy Efficiency Alberta was running their program, they had an eligibility list, and it was only installers. or rather it was a list of approved installers for the province. So previously with the old incentive, I don't believe you would have been able to do that as an individual, but perhaps with any future incentive, should that show up, you know, it may have different rules around it to let you do that, to put in your own system and apply for the incentive. But yeah, it's a little bit of an open question. As far as actually being able to put a system in, connect to the grid, as long as you sort of follow those general steps that I described there, you should be able to do that on your own. But there may be an eligibility gap, if you will, to be eligible for the incentives.
Noted. Okay. So we've got a couple of similar questions coming in on insurance. So Jeff, I'm going to read you one. My insurance company quoted an excessive rate for adding insurance for a solar array. Basically half my yearly return on investment. Can you comment? So is that common across the sector?
So I think it's we have seen it before, but I will say that certainly there have been certainly different insurance carriers or providers will apply different costs to that solar, to adding solar to your home. So we've seen examples where people have looked at the rate and they've said that's not going to fly. They go look and find a different provider and the number is manageable. You know, I think people like something just to where my head is at on insurance is, you know, you're putting a system on your home. I think just like anything else, as far as an upgrade that you make to your home, you want to ensure that the insurance company is aware of what you're doing, right? So the example I always use is, you know, if you had a linoleum floor in your kitchen, which I do, and let's say I get to the point where I put hardwood floor in there, if I want that replacement cost to be covered, should, heaven forbid, something happen on an insurance claim perspective, I better let them know that I put hardwood floor in my home, and, you know, there may be an adjustment to my premium because of that. And, you know, similarly on the solar side, I guess I would be wanting in my own, if I was in that position, to ensure that my insurance company was aware of that, but also be aware that, you know, different providers certainly seem to be applying different premiums, or I guess, is it a rider? Maybe I'll call it a rider. I'm not sure if that's the exact correct term, to adding solar to the home. So shop around.
Very good to know. Is there anything from the business owner or homeowner's perspective that they can do to mitigate some of those potential insurance impacts there?
I think, like, basically, I don't believe so. I think it would be a good pre-step during the process when you're trying to decide to go solar, to ensure that you understand that cost. And it sounds like the person who asked the question had done that. So good for them. They're totally on the right track there. The thing is, you know, if you have been permitted to connect to the microgeneration, or sorry, to the utility side, you pass through that microgeneration process and application, and that means that you put in a system that's safe, operable, functions as per the requirements of the Canadian Electrical Code, any structural considerations. That's all there, right? So you can be comfortable that you have a safe system when you've gone through the proper process steps. So
that's right. And that just really underscores the importance of making sure you go with a reputable installer who knows what they're doing and can help you with fulfilling all of those steps to safely connect a high quality system. Is there any word of future rebates from provincial and federal governments for Albertans looking to install residential solar? That's a great question. And that's definitely something we at CanSIA are working very hard to achieve. So as Jeff alluded to, the EEA residential and commercial solar program, which was wound down, I believe in May of this year, was it, Jeff?
Well, applications sort of stopped right at the election time frame, and then projects that got through and are approved have till, I believe, till March to get installed. 2020 March.
Okay. So, I mean, that was obviously an extremely popular program. I think we saw close to 1,700 new solar systems installed in a relatively short amount of time. I think maybe a year and a half or so under that. So we're working very hard to restore that in some form, and just knowing the tremendous solar resource available in Alberta, the importance of decarbonizing Alberta's electricity, which right now is like roughly 80% from coal. I mean, solar makes so much sense in Alberta, and it's a high priority for us as an industry association to ensure that homeowners, business owners, farmers, and community groups are able to take advantage of the potential of solar once again. So we're optimistic that with the new federal government in Ottawa and some of their very clear priorities around climate change, and working with Alberta on an energy transition, that we can work with them to deliver some sort of federal program. And we will obviously keep this group posted on any progress we make toward achieving that. So unfortunately, that's all I can really say on that right now. I think that sort of covers the questions that have come in, I think. So, Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think you know, you did a great job of answering that last question. You know, as Nick said, CanSIA is really working hard to try to make something happen as far as the next phase of incentives, or whatever form that may take, to really give people who want to put solar on their homes, businesses, and farms in place and get that rolling again. So, you know, when I say CanSIA, you know, Nick is definitely on that path. The whole team at CanSIA is really focused on it. The Alberta Solar Microgen Caucus, so the local group, quote unquote, if you will, is focused on it. And, you know, we really are trying to make something happen there. And yeah, it's just, you know, it's going to take time, and it may, or we ultimately, we may or may not be successful here. We'll see. So.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to have to wrap up, but huge thanks to Jeff and to KCP Energy for taking part today. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. This was, I hope, a useful session, and yeah, our contact information is there. So if you have any other follow-up questions, please do feel free to get in touch. And yeah, have a happy holiday, and we'll look forward to connecting in the new year. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you everyone for your time, and have a great holiday.